Stop whining about Star Wars The Last Jedi. And before you get too pissed off, just give me a second. Let me explain why everything that happens from a character standpoint absolutely makes sense when you look at it from a certain point of view. Lots of people are mad at Star Wars The Last Jedi. They think Rian Johnson ruined Luke Skywalker. I've even heard some people say that The Last Jedi ruined my childhood, which is patently ridiculous. The Last Jedi simply gave more of the elements of storytelling that make these stories great, and some people just want to be served sort of weak sauce so they can pet their nostalgic boners without having to think. It's all about the characters, the archetypal role these characters play, and those roles are what draws us into these stories. To understand the Luke Skywalker of this era, and to understand why his character fits with what we've known in the past, we have to first understand how archetypes work in storytelling. Just about every story ever told has some version of an archetypal structure when it comes to the characters. For the sake of discussion, we'll concentrate kind of on a few of them, but here are the top 5 of the most typical archetypes. There's the hero, the mentor, the everyman, the innocent, and the villain. Okay? If you think about the characters in Star Wars right now, you probably can start to identify some of those archetypes in what we've seen to this point. If you grew up with Star Wars for the past 40 years, if I were to ask you who is the hero of Star Wars, which character would you identify? Luke Skywalker has occupied the hero role in the story arc for most of my life. Maybe nostalgia is preventing you from seeing the Luke of this trilogy as he is now, what archetype he represents now, and why his actions leading up to this film are entirely within his character. Heroes are archetypal good, but that goodness will be challenged along the way. We've seen this story arc play itself out in the first Star Wars trilogy. Ultimately, Luke prevails and rides off into the sunset. But what we are presented in this Star Wars trilogy is not the Luke Skywalker of the first trilogy. We are presented with a Luke that has been through the rest of his life. He has become the teacher and ultimately came to occupy the mentor archetypal role, which in the previous trilogy was occupied by Obi-Wan Kenobi. What we see in The Last Jedi is the result of a truly hard life where the decisions and actions Luke and the others from the first trilogy ultimately have worn them down. Han and Leia have lost a child. Luke has tried and failed to realize his future as he saw it as a Jedi Master. And that ruination was inflicted by his own hand. Luke tried to restart the Jedi Order and failed. And in doing so, he helped to create a formidable enemy out of his own nephew. Everything he says about the Jedi in this film rings true. After centuries of failure, maybe it is time for the Jedi to end. He lays out the argument for that pretty well himself. Trust me when I say that if the plotline of The Last Jedi was focused around Rey going to find Luke so that he could come and save the day for all the resistance, we in our subconscious would be very dissatisfied. And eventually we would realize it, maybe even feel betrayed by that particular plot device. One of the most engaging elements in the storytelling of Star Wars is that we get to watch characters evolve from one archetype to the next. This is a common element in nearly all the archetypal stories, but we see it here in Star Wars at its most engaging. In the first trilogy, episodes 4 through 6, we watch Luke evolve from the innocent to the hero, and the arc ends as he's just about to begin that next phase moving toward the mentor. Episodes 7 and 8 slowly introduce us to the Luke of 40 years later who, much like Obi-Wan Kenobi before him, played the role of mentor and failed. Remember that in A New Hope, we find Obi-Wan at the beginning living as a hermit on an isolated planet, well beyond his prime, and he perceives himself as a failure for playing a role in the creation of Darth Vader, who also began as an innocent and evolved into the villain, as Kylo Ren does in the current trilogy. For those of you who feel betrayed by the portrayal of Luke as a washed-up, bitter hermit who can't save the galaxy, you're all missing the point. Kylo Ren, let's just take one example, would have destroyed the real Luke Skywalker in real one-on-one combat, just like Darth Vader destroyed Obi-Wan Kenobi. I can only assume Luke's intent was not to meet him on the field of battle and save the day. He would die, probably quickly, and the First Order would make it into the mine and slaughter everyone inside. Luke wisely understood that Kylo Ren could not resist coming out to fight him. Luke is not the hero of this current arc of films. This trilogy, Luke Skywalker plays the mentor role. He is not the hero. His intent was to distract Kylo and the First Order long enough for the outnumbered and outgunned remnants of the Resistance to find a way to escape the mine before the First Order burst in. And he succeeded. Let me give you an example of how this mirrors other stories that we know and love. Let's say Gandalf facing the Balrog in Fellowship of the Ring so the others could escape. We don't question the sacrifice that Gandalf makes because we've never known him in any other archetypal role but the mentor. Often the mentor, older and wiser, sacrifices him or herself for the good of the protagonist, that is, the hero. Many of us are not comfortable with the role Luke plays in The Last Jedi because he previously occupied that hero role in the formative years of many of our lives. And his transformation from hero to mentor happened off-screen. When we finally catch up to him in The Last Jedi, he has receded. He has diminished. The title of the film has always been kind of a tease, like, who is the Last Jedi? What does that mean? And we found out Luke is the Last Jedi. What Rey and the other Force-sensitive people in the world will become is not the Jedi Order of old. They will be something maybe better. People seem to be upset because Luke is portrayed as weak and fallible when faced with the darkness inside Kylo Ren. He struggles with that conflict again between the light and dark inside him. This time, he's tempted to strike down the growing darkness in the service of light. And this seems to go against his archetypal role as we have known it. But to believe that is to believe that each archetypal character plays his or her role perfectly. And we know that's not the case, especially in the Star Wars universe, where every character is internally conflicted in one way or another, while still facing the external conflict of the forward-moving plot. These conflicts always pit the character against their better nature, and most of the time, no matter what the decision, the outcome is the opposite of what the character intended. This is what we see in the fallen hero/mentor of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Who has taken his place as the innocent who evolves into the hero? The answer is, when you think about it, really easy. Rey started out in Force Awakens as the innocent, as Luke did in A New Hope, and has, by the end of Last Jedi, taken on the role of the hero. Kylo has also made the transition from innocent to villain, much as Anakin Skywalker did in the Phantom Menace trilogy. But what makes this character continue to be compelling is that last glimmer of hope that he still has light in him and could be redeemed, just like his grandfather before him. Rey is unsure of her place in this story because she doesn't know where she came from, but by the end of the story, she has begun to move past that. This trilogy is not a continuation of the story of the original characters from A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. It's a new arc with new characters who are in many ways taking the same journey as Luke and his compatriots did in that first trilogy. What we get in The Last Jedi are truly conflicted characters that struggle with the fallibility of their own human nature, who sometimes fail under the strain of those expectations. What Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi was take those conflicted characters and tighten the vice further, and that sometimes in a moment of weakness, they can make poor decisions that have repercussions for decades forward. That's actually one of the reasons we have become so attached to Star Wars and the characters. We can see ourselves in each of them. That's what makes good storytelling. Just like the world of The Lord of the Rings, Hamlet, Citizen Kane, I could go on. It's the weakness in these characters that allows us to love them, to identify with them. That's real. That's why we watch. I want my stories to challenge me and make me strive against the conflicts in my own life. That's what Star Wars: The Last Jedi does with Luke and many of the other characters. Characters who fight against the gray of their own lives are the ones who teach us something about ourselves that resonate with us. They're the ones who we see ourselves in and inspire us to battle our fears. That's why The Last Jedi is a great film. Among the best of the entire series, it remains true to the archetypal coding that George Lucas set out in the first trilogy and pushes the characters farther than we've seen them pushed previously. There's a reason that they call Star Wars and other movies like them space operas. They're dramatic, filled with characters that are larger than life, but yet remain human and conflicted. It's their fallibility that keeps them grounded and keeps us coming back for more. So again, stop whining about Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I mean, these characters, if you think about it in the span of all of the Star Wars films, are acting and reacting in ways that are typical of them as characters as we've known them for the entire lifespan of the series. It all makes sense. Thanks for being here. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are about this. I look forward to a spirited discussion. Until the next time, I'm out.